Welcome to We Chat Divorce, hosted by Karen Shalou, Legal Liaison, and Katherine Shanahan, CDFA. Each episode, we sit down with divorce professionals and industry experts to provide insights and frank discussions about real people, real situations, and real divorce to help you achieve your best life post-divorce. This episode of We Chat Divorce is brought to you by My Divorce Solution, offering divorce financial planning so clients can secure the divorce settlement they deserve. Visit mydivorcesolution.com to request access.
Welcome to We Chat Divorce. Katherine and I will be welcoming Bree Sullivan to our podcast today to discuss Divorce Decoded, From Assets to the Courtroom. Bree Sullivan is an attorney and author specializing in helping Christian women navigate the complexities of divorce.
Well, before we invite her in, this is kind of a interesting topic for me, right? And I won't bring this up to the attorney because she has nothing to do with this. But, when we say helping Christian women, I thought about the times I sit in church. I'm Catholic, and I sit in church and I hear this, you shouldn't be going to church if you're a divorcee or you've gotten a divorce. And it really rubs me the wrong way. Like, okay, because I'm Catholic, I've been divorced. I shouldn't go to church. And so why is it different for Christian women than any woman going through divorce? Okay, maybe she just specializes in that, which is great, but we all have the same feelings going forward, right? So I just want women listening today, whatever comes out of the conversation, you don't need a reason to get divorced other than you're not happy. You know your true self. And even if you're Christian, we carry this big weight of guilt on us that we shouldn't have to carry on us. And all of you deserve financial knowledge. And that's what My Divorce Solution is all about. So that, to me, I hope is the takeaway today, that you deserve financial knowledge and you deserve to be happy, no matter what your religion is.
I agree, Katherine. That was really great. Now let's move on and have our conversation with Bree and welcome her to the conversation. Welcome, Bree. We're so glad to have you today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I'm sure it's going to be a great conversation. And our topic today is Divorce Decoded, From Assets to the Courtroom. But first, let me just tell our listeners a little bit about you. So Bree, with her impeccable record of academic achievements and commitment to justice, has distinguished herself as a top divorce lawyer over her 20-year career. Beyond the courtroom, Bree's combination of vast legal experience and profound personal experiences have made her an award-winning author. She's written the book, Crush Your Divorce and Keep Your Faith, and its sequel, Crush Your Comeback, Essential Guides of Encouragement and Empowerment for Christian Women Walking Through the Harsh Reality of Divorce. And I feel that that's a very unique space to be, because a lot of times the word Christian and divorce can't even be said in the same sentence. So I'm really excited for this conversation. So Bree, before we hop into our topic, can you spend a couple minutes sharing with our listeners a little bit about your story and how that has created the passion for what you do today?
Sure, I'd be glad to. I've been practicing law 22 years. 20 of those years were in the area of family law. So I've drilled down and specialized like they tell you to do. And I just have really enjoyed my career helping families and people in their hardest times. But it wasn't until I went through my own divorce in 2018 with 3 children after a long marriage that I really understood and came to realize how painful and raw the experience is when it's you going through it. So I got a whole new perspective when it was me as a Christian woman going through a divorce in a small southern town in the Bible Belt. And it made me realize there's just nothing to read. If you're that woman going through through that hard time. You go to the Christian bookstore, all the books about divorce are A, written by men, and B, say, don't do it. God hates it. Stay married. So where does that leave a person who doesn't have a choice? They're in this divorce either because they've been filed against and they have to defend, or they're in an abusive situation, or they're being abandoned. I mean, you have these legal remedies for a reason. So my work in authoring these books has been to speak to that woman mainly. The themes are also good for men if they can read past the pronouns and see themselves in my hypotheticals. But there's a need for this conversation, for people feeling shame about being in this situation. And going through it myself taught me a lot. So I guess that's what informs my practice.
Well, you mentioned, two reasons, either they're being sued against or filed against, or they're being in an abusive relationship. What about the woman who just isn't happy in that relationship?
Well, she's normally unhappy because she's been mistreated. I mean, they go hand in hand. I don't know a single person who gets married thinking, oh, can't wait to get divorced one day. That just doesn't happen. So if a person is that despondent and that miserable, they may not talk about it. They talk about it with me in my conference room all the time. So I know this is the case. They're sad about being divorced. Nobody thinks that's a great outcome. And there's normally some abuse or some kind of unfaithfulness that they aren't sharing with friends and family that they're really struggling with, that led them to that place. So all those things are connected.
Sure, for sure. And the historical context is, the male is typically the leader. And so the role of the submissive wife doesn't really follow through to the word divorce. Yeah.
Well, the submission piece is, we could talk all day about that.
Yes, we could.
The model in the Bible is mutual submission. It's not
Yeah.
just the woman. And if the man's not doing his part, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you say that and you help people kind of think through that, because when you're going through a divorce and you end up in a courtroom, right, that even makes it more challenging, more difficult. It ramps it up. And I think it'll be very helpful to go through some of those talking points so people can kind of reframe that experience in their lives. So let's hop right into it. Today, we're talking about, from assets to the courtroom. In my divorce solution, we're all about helping people financially prepare, but often people can't avoid the courtroom for whatever reason. So we're going to talk today about, how to prepare a case for your attorney and talking about practical courtroom strategies with you.
Okay, great.
So first question is, can you walk us through some of the key principles that guide the division of property in a divorce?
Well, first of all, the ground rules are different in every state. I practice in Georgia, so just for the record, none of this is legal advice for your listeners. Everyone needs their own attorney. And newsflash, if your ex tells you you don't need a lawyer, that's your clue that you do. So you should always get an attorney to help you through these things. But primarily what I tell my clients and what I write about in section 3 of my book is that you need to know what's there to know what's fair. You need to know what's there in order to divide it. And a lot of times litigants, male and female, don't know what their assets are because the other spouse handled all of that during the marriage and they were just trusted with it. So you end up having to turn over all kinds of stones. And sometimes the other party isn't very cooperative. So you have to think outside the box about how to find all the assets.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like, sometimes in that space, when you ask a spouse for the documents or information, it's received as a threat of sorts.
Well, there's this view, and it's not accurate and it's not legal, but at least here it's not legal. There's this view that if my name is on that property, or if I paid for that property during the marriage, it's mine. But that's not how it is. That's just not the law, at least where I am.
Well, that's what our process unravels, right? So it's interesting when you come in to get your financial portrait, we do that financial discovery piece. And so when people are putting in their statements or explaining their accounts, it's, this is my husband's pension, or, this is my husband's bank account. Well, okay, just because it's in your husband's name doesn't make it non-marital, right? There's a lot to that. And it's so interesting to see them get that aha moment, like, oh my gosh, I've been staying in this abusive relationship for this long. And meanwhile, only because I was afraid that none of that money was mine or considered mine, to get that self-discovery is really empowering. That's one of the things I love about our process, because we're able to go through and just help them understand that financial clarity piece.
Well, it brings a person hope to think they aren't going to be broke and out there floundering to find housing or whatever. I mean, if you feel like you're going to get a piece of the marital pie that you didn't expect to get, it's very hopeful. That's a wonderful conversation. I've had that conversation many times in my office with people who just thought they didn't have anything.
Right. So, Bree, let's talk about some of the common pitfalls or mistakes people can make when it comes to property division. And I know we could all talk about this all day long, but I'm sure there's some common ones that we all encounter every day.
Yeah. The one that I talk about in my book, that's easy for people to remember, is the 2 O's of property division. This is how I characterized it, just to help people get it in their minds. There's ownership and there's obligation. So say you've got a vehicle or a house. It's titled in someone's name or maybe both parties' names. That's the ownership piece. But then the obligation piece is what people forget. You transfer the property in your divorce document, and sometimes you forget to say, okay, wait a minute, how's that debt getting handled? And is it still in my name even after I've given you the property? So that's where people run into a lot of trouble handling their own divorces in particular. Lawyers know that rule and they take care of it usually. But when people do pro se divorces and they bring that to me after the fact, oh, my heart just sinks for them, because you're stuck. I mean, if you're stuck owning a home with someone and your name's on the deed and you've transferred your ownership in a deed to them, they have all the goodie and all you have is the liability. And you can't get a new home because your credit's tied up. You're renting forever potentially, and you may never get your money out of that asset either. I mean, that's another side to the whole analysis. But that's the biggest pitfall that I see people fall into. They forget both of those facets of the analysis.
Yeah, I love that when you have a spouse that comes in and they say, no, typically my husband said I can keep the house. No, he doesn't want the house. And we just listen. And then we say, okay, well, let's go through. And we do have a high participation rate of spouses who like to tell us their side as well. But, they don't realize that they're negotiating another asset away. The spouse didn't mean you get to keep that and their share of the equity in the home. They said that you can keep that because they want to keep their retirement account or something else. They're not understanding what that trade-off was. And that's why when people make these one-off negotiations, because it feels good at that moment, it's really a costly mistake that you could be making.
Right. It can be. And the other one, the timeshare. Timeshares are not an asset.
No, they are a debt.
That too.
Yes.
They're not an asset. People say, oh, I got to keep the timeshare. Well, you're stuck with it and you're paying for it till the kingdom comes. So enjoy that.
Especially in the South. I'm in the South also. It's the homes that have mandatory golf club dues. If you want to keep that home, but you also have a $30,000 yearly dues to the golf club that you're probably never going to golf at, right? So you have to be really careful when you negotiate that as well.
Absolutely. It's just so important that people have counsel.
And for us, it's so important you have financial clarity so that you can go to counsel and understand what you're talking about. Because if you go to your attorney and you're prepared financially, then your attorney is able to do their good work based on the data, not on the emotion that you're feeling.
That's right.
100%.
That's my point in my book is sections 1 and 2 are all about getting your mind and spirit in a place where you can do the business part. And section 3 is how to do the business part with your lawyer. Because that's what people struggle with. They're making emotional choices and those are not wise 9 times out of 10.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with that more. Mm-hmm.
And it's from just a lack of not knowing. So many times people come to us, Bree, and, they'll say, well, I feel guilty about, I don't know, I'm just going to let him have his pension or his retirement account or whatever it may be. And, we understand the emotion of that, but we'll always say, just hold that thought. You don't need to have that conversation right now. Let's get our work done so you understand what's on the table, what's divisible between the two of you, what the financial impact is. And then you can have that conversation. And then you can work through these division scenarios with more knowledge. And then if you want to give up that asset or have that asset be entirely on your spouse's side of the balance sheet, then you can make that decision. And I do think one of the common pitfalls, and very common, is having those negotiations before you understand what that financial impact is, because they're going to come to you, Bree, as an attorney and say, I want the house no matter what. But if you don't know what that means to you, that could be financial devastation for you. I mean, that would be worst case scenario. But to your point, there's nuances about that if you haven't anticipated that, or if you don't know that, it could end up to be something you don't want.
Absolutely right. And you need the whole picture to analyze what's a pro and what's a con.
Yeah, for sure.
Look like they're bright and shiny, and you want them in the divorce so you can brag to your friends, are really going to bring you a lot of heartache later. So it's good to know that.
Yeah.
Let's shift this gear a little bit to the, we're talking about financial, if you're listening, we're talking about financial division of your assets, but there's also the other side, and that's your support side, not child support, because that's a calculator in every state, guidelines in every state. But in Georgia, the common question is that alimony question or spousal support. How important is it for their living expenses to be recorded properly? And how much at heart do you take to the actual budget to calculate that alimony number?
You mean on the financial disclosure? How important?
I mean, in settlement negotiations. Yeah, I do mean on the financial disclosure, and then taking it forward to actually what they end up with. Because a lot of people think whatever my financial disclosure of my expenses are, the deficit there is what I'm going to get in support.
Not necessarily. In Georgia, alimony is based on one party's need and the other party's ability to pay. And there are certain nuances, like you're barred from getting alimony if your adultery created the separation. In my state, that's not the same everywhere. But here you get penalized, and it's an automatic, you don't get any if you cheated, and that's why everything broke down. But I agree that the disclosure needs to be complete. I always tell my clients on the expense section of that, we call it the DRFA, Domestic Relations Financial Affidavit. On your DRFA, be thorough on your expenses. The worst thing you can do is not include everything and then say, oh, but Judge, you didn't give me enough money. I have all these costs. Well, you didn't tell us that. So we rely on that document. I tell my clients, be thorough with that and really think about it and spend the time to get it right. And then you also need to look at your budget going forward. When you have kind of a working settlement framework, I think it's important to revisit that DRFA document or that financial document with all of your numbers on it, and make sure it is consistent with what you're going to have in the future. So if you took the house, for instance, and you're going to be paying the mortgage for the first time ever, you got to put that in the numbers, along with all the upkeep and, maintenance cost of having a home, for instance. So it shifts during the case a lot of times. So you have to go back and reassess. I guess you found that to be true too.
Yeah, we do the whole lifestyle analysis with our clients, and we help them fill out the DRFA, and whatever, every state's a different name, right? But a lot of times, the expectation is whatever that need is, that's what they want, and it's really rare that I see someone get exactly what their need is. And the southern states are the hardest, so it's always interesting to hear the perspective from your point of view.
Yeah. So for instance, this is what we encounter, Bree. The income to the family is $30,000 a month. Mm-hmm. Okay. Spouse doesn't work. So the spouse who doesn't work, their need comes out to be $18,000 a month. And they think that is what they're going to get because that's what they need. Mm-hmm. So they're shocked then when they say, well, this is my need. Why wouldn't I get it? I'm accustomed to it. I think the miscommunication is in the context of ability to pay. So
the expenses get duplicated in a divorce. I mean, you're combining whatever resources the couple has to pay for one home to run as a married couple. And then you get divorced and you have double expenses sometimes, or something like that. You got two places to pay for, two lifestyles to fund. I always tell my clients, at least in Georgia, it's not realistic to expect the same lifestyle after divorce. At least not in South Georgia where I am, maybe Atlanta where they have big money. But down here, we struggle to get people through it and on with life. And I always tell them, prepare for a lifestyle change and start thinking about your career move. What are you going to do to work? Because you may need to work for the first time in your life, and it'll be good for you. I try to get them excited about it. Like, this will be fulfilling. Find something you love to do. But you always have to deal with that question in my area of the state to get people aware that it's not going to be the cakewalk it's been. You're going to have to.
Yeah. And conversely, we have very high net worth estates where the spouse has no idea what the cash flow is. And they, their budget is very, very conservative relative to what we know the cash flow is running through that family. And so, when they separate, they're afraid because they don't know and they've reduced their lifestyle. And so their need is nowhere near, like it's way less than spouse's ability to pay. Right. So is it always based on that need, or are there situations where the ability to pay would provide more for that spouse, even if their DERFA or their, presentation of need is much less?
I think there's room for the argument. At least here, it's in our court's discretion. We don't have a formula for alimony. Some states have a formula, from what I understand. We don't have it. Would be so nice, but we don't.
Yeah.
And so really, you just have to kind of know how far you can push it with your judge. Like,
okay.
The judge is different. So you need a skilled attorney with some history in the circuit you're in to kind of get a feel. But yeah, in high net worth situations, you always are able to ask for more, mainly because if that recipient spouse is getting a lot of the assets still to maintain, and there are debts associated and upkeep associated, all those costs go into the column of need. It all kind of connects.
Yeah.
Is your state one that when you're separated and you're dating, you will void yourself from alimony as well, or just from filing? Like South Carolina, North Carolina, if you're dating, you cannot receive spousal support.
Wow. You guys are harder core than we are.
Oh, no, it's terrible.
Our judges don't seem to care if you're dating after separation when it comes to the financial part.
That's how most American states are.
Yeah, they don't like it if you're introducing the children to somebody new before you're divorced, unless it's like a marathon divorce that won't end. And then they're like, don't blame you, But yeah, here it's got to be the cause of the separation.
Oh, that's a very good distinguishing word.
And that's a hard thing to prove.
Well, how do you prove that? Right.
Hard thing to prove. So it becomes this, like, in the court's discretion. It's why lawyers have a job, because we all have an argument about it. It's a gray area. Hard to have a bright line, unless you've got a private investigator placing you at the scene of the crime, and then the next day you say, I want a divorce because I love this other guy. It's just not usually that clear.
Yeah.
So true. Another topic I want to cover today is what I call the financial discovery money pit, where, our clients want to just subpoena everything. They believe their spouse is hiding everything. What are the guidelines that you help your clients with? Because, they want to know everything, but sometimes they believe there's a lot of, I guess, lying or lack of disclosure when that's not really the case. So how do you walk your clients through that in a way that, they're just not throwing all of their divisible assets into this money pit?
Well, we try to look at realistic goals with that too. We start with discovery to the party, hoping they'll comply, usually. Sometimes we'll do third-party requests right out of the gate to make sure we get things in time for a hearing from the bank or whoever, if we don't think they're going to cooperate quickly. But I usually try to give the party the first opportunity to come clean with whatever's there. And then we get whatever they give us. And a lot of times you can mitigate your cost on third-party discovery using what little information you have. So for instance, you can take a tax return. And normally if it's a joint filing, both spouses can get their hands on that pretty easily from the CPA or whoever. And you can look and see if there was a capital gain. And that leads you to the stock account. That leads you to the mutual funds and the whatever you got a gain on. You can also get, and this is what I tell my clients, go get the insurance policy information on all of your property. And down here, we got a lot of farming communities. We got like equipment, tractors, and that stuff's expensive. Have you seen what a tractor costs these days, or a combine? Like all the farming stuff is a big deal. So that's just one example, but anything you're insuring is valued on the document you have with your insurer. And that number was agreed upon by your fella who got the insurance policy and said, it's worth this, insure it for this. I got to replace it for this. So that's just like proof positive, objectively obtainable, that the spouse can usually get pretty easily. And it doesn't cost a lot. That gives you some valuation numbers that if you can live with, provide evidence for court to say, Judge, this is the value, unless they say something different. But it can get super expensive. And if someone's deceptive and you have to do a lot of third-party discovery, pay for the records, as you know, you pay for the subpoenas, you serve them certain ways that are required. It's all these hoops to jump through. You can really get in the hole fast. So I've had this happen. I've had to pull clients aside and say, listen, you are blowing so much money on this discovery. You need to just cut your losses and take what you got and go to court and tell the judge you think this stuff's there, you're not sure, and then insist on a non-disclosure provision where if something's discovered later and it's a certain value, then it either automatically comes to you or you can reopen the whole doggone thing. And if the other party won't sign the thing with that provision in there, that is a smoking gun to me and a red flag that you are onto something. So
can you get that non-disclosure signed before you even decide to go to mediation or to trial?
It's normally in the final document. Normally I throw it in at the end. And that's a good gauge. Like if you had all the stuff worked out and you're not quite sure everything, and you propose that provision go in and they back up a little bit, you might need to reconsider your settlement. Another place to get good clues is from bank statements and credit card statements, because wherever they're paying can lead to assets they're paying for.
Yeah.
That they might not have told you about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always the big question with everyone because, you never get justice in family law. It just doesn't happen. And, it's really upsetting if you don't have control of your finances and you're assuming, there was a mistrust. So you're assuming there's been a lot of deceitful things going on. And sometimes there are and sometimes there are not, right? But if you're not the financially astute person, it's hard to let that settle, so that you can move forward with your life. This is a stage of your life. So I think always getting the financial clarity of what you don't know is also very helpful, because then you can live with it moving forward.
Right. And people need to remember too, that we're in this new age of digital currency. And a lot of people are hiding money in crypto that's hard to nail down and hard to find, hard to understand. It's like this whole language to learn is difficult. There's also gold. Sometimes I've even had cases where people buried hundreds of thousands of dollars in the backyard. I mean, welcome to South Georgia. Maybe that doesn't happen where you guys are, but
if you live in South Georgia, go ahead and move and wait 6 months till you file.
I like it here, but I just deal with my, what I've got in this area. And that's what I run into. A lot of people try to hide their assets.
Yeah.
They don't think honestly, these men come into court too. And some women feel this way too. I don't want to be a gender basher, but a lot of times men will come into court because they've earned all the money. They've built all the wealth for the family. And they have this attitude of, she doesn't deserve it.
Yes.
Or he did not. And I mean, it doesn't play well in court, but it's a common theme. We run into it all the time.
Well, talking about playing well in court, we get a lot of executive women that come to us and they're the breadwinners. And I am shocked at how many men are not working. And the judge or the attorney say to the women, well, you let this happen. Like, well, no, we didn't let this happen.
You just wouldn't get off the couch, fella. Yeah.
And so now they're paying support and they're angry. The women are more angry paying support than men are angry, and men are angry too. But the women are more angry because their husbands haven't done anything for the last 5 years. They haven't taken care of the kids, although they say they were, but the kids have daycare and all of that. So how do you get a spouse to get an imputed income when they haven't worked? And what's the time frame that people should be watching? Like, okay, this has gone on for 1 year. Okay, this has gone on for 2 years. I better stop this now because after 5 years, it's going to be hard to battle.
I say a year or two.
Year or 2.
Mhm.
I wouldn't want to be with a guy who didn't contribute. I mean, didn't contribute something either in time or in effort or in financial help.
Mhm.
That just wears you out in a hurry. I mean,
Mhm.
anytime anyone, man or woman, is married to someone who doesn't pull their side of the cart, it's that's hard. It creates issues.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people think that filing for divorce after a long period of time will resolve that issue. But
Mhm.
I think they've set a precedence by then.
Yes.
So then how do you undo that, or how do you rectify that? And we've also been in cases where attorneys take very proactive positions that, well, it doesn't matter that you didn't work and that you stayed home with your children for 10, 15, 20 years. Guess what? They're going to do a vocational exam and you are going to have an imputed income. So we see it all over the place, but it is something that, a lot of families have to wrestle with.
They do. It's true.
Yeah. So Bree, what takeaway tips do you have for our audience today, just relative to being in a courtroom and taking your assets through to a fair settlement?
Well, I think number one, you've got to have organization. You've got to give your lawyer orderly records, if you have them, if you can get them yourself, and a good, at least, framework for what you think is there. And it has to be in order for the lawyer to use it. So I always tell my clients, and I wrote about this in my book, give it to me in this format. And don't send me 10 emails a day. Send me one email with a bunch of stuff. Be efficient. That saves money too. People think they can just contact you anytime they have a thought. And, each one of those encounters is a 0.1. So it adds up a lot more than if you just spent 20 minutes going over all of it at once. So people can save themselves that money. But I think what I talk about in my book and what I always tell people is when you present your case, you want your attorney to be able to say what you want coherently, have it all in one place, easy to understand. Judges are just people like us. They want a quick outline. Say it, explain it with evidence. I like to have at least 1 or 2 documents for each facet of my proposal that I'm asking the court to embrace. I want it to be easy to agree with me. And I want to have the best looking financial disclosure in the room where the judge is looking at mine, not theirs. So, those are little strategies. You want to do your work because it comes off like you're the voice of reason in the room. If yours looks better and is more orderly than theirs. I mean, there's just some intangible there, I think. So you say it, you explain it with evidence, and then you show with the evidence. You say, okay, this is the point. I want this bank account. This is the statement from this date. This is the statement from this date. I'm entitled to this amount, and this is why. And then it's just very orderly. People do well with that. Judges do well with that. You got a point there. It's easy to say, if you're the judge, I think I agree with that. It makes sense. That's how.
So if you're listening today, you just basically did a commercial for the My Divorce Solution Financial Portrait, because that's exactly what we do. We digitalize and organize their inventory. We do their financial analysis. We do division scenarios, and then they can hand that off to their attorney, who can access any of those documents by a click of a button. And you get to be a good lawyer then. You get to have an organized, prepared client who's gone through the emotional part and has got now data-driven responses. And the attorney gets to be the good attorney. That's how you know you have a good attorney, because they're actually applying the law to your organization and what you believe you need to move forward with your life. And I think everyone should work that way. And that's how the good attorneys rise to the top, and they do their work for you. And then we wouldn't have so many people upset with their attorneys, because a lot of times attorneys can't do their work because they don't have the information to do it. And so everyone gets frustrated because they don't know how to move forward. There's no financial clarity. So how can a divorcing person make a decision if they don't have clarity? And how does an attorney do their work if they don't have the proper information as well?
That's right. it's a team. You have to have your client's cooperation and participation. I
Yes.
give every client a list of homework. It's probably along the same lines of what you do. Of all the things I want them to bring me as they're talking. Okay, that's a good point. Give me evidence of that. You got a photo, you got a recording, you got a document, you got a financial statement, you got a loan application. That's another place to find assets.
It's a great place to find. Yeah, especially and verifying income too.
Yes, and they are so boastful in loan applications.
Yes.
Oh,
That's
look
why I
how
love
much I
them.
earned, so I'll pay your loan back. And it's often inflated, but it's their own words. So you can say,
It's
oh,
their words. I say
it's beautiful. I
I
love it.
love that. Okay, so if your spouse is applying for something, let them, but get a copy of that so that we can get that documented.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's so true. And Bree, I agree. You hit the nail on the head. If you know what you have and you're able to support that with documentation and then convert that to what you want, and you know the financial impact of that, and you know your ability to negotiate and compromise, that is a home run in a divorce transaction. So thank you for that. I really appreciate your the work that you do and helping clients really navigate this difficult process.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to do this work. It's a ministry. I feel like it's why I'm on the earth,
Mm-hmm.
to help people through it. And then they're done and they're so happy and they feel hopeful again. It's a beautiful transformation to see play out.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
I always say divorce does not define who you are. It's a part of your story, but it's not your total story. Your story is still yet to come.
Yeah, it builds fortitude too. I always tell people, get ready to be like stronger than you ever thought you could ever be. Because if you can get through this, you can get through anything.
I can remember saying, they always say God doesn't give you anything you can't handle. And I'm always like, God, why do you think I can handle so much?
It's true, isn't it? Yeah.
I've had enough. Why do you think I can handle so much more?
Life was never promised to be easy, though. In
Yeah.
fact, I think we're promised tribulation and hardship to get through our
Mhm.
lifetimes. And if we can all help one another, that's what we're here for.
Yes,
Absolutely.
totally agree.
So Bree, how can our listeners and viewers learn more about you and your work?
Well, I've got some social media presence. I'm on Facebook, Sullivan Law Firm. I'm also on Instagram, Lawyer Bree, and also Crush Your Divorce for my books. On TikTok, I'm Lawyer Bree.
Okay.
What else do I have? I think I've got LinkedIn. I've got some websites, crushyourdivorce.com.
That's
My
wonderful.
books are on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target. Lots of booksellers have it. So you can get it
That's
anywhere.
excellent. It's a
Yeah.
great ministry for sure. Thank you so much for being here today. I want to thank our listeners for listening to our podcast. We hope to bring really good resources to our listeners. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone navigating divorce. Submit your questions and check out our resources at mydivorcesolution.com. You can email us at wechat@ck11.net. Remember, knowledge is power, and you're stronger than you think.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of We Chat Divorce. We hope this episode was informative and supportive on your divorce journey. If you're looking for more support for navigating divorce with confidence and clarity, head over to mydivorcesolution.com for more podcast episodes, divorce events, and resources for your divorce. We'll see you back here for our next episode.